Greetings, everyone. I'm your host, Dr. Mallory D. McCoy, and welcome to this special series, The Telepathy Narrative. Who gets to tell the story? This series exists because of my son. My journey with him, learning him, understanding him, and witnessing the ways he communicates beyond what we've been taught has expanded me in ways I didn't even know were possible. And through that journey, I've had to ask deeper questions about communication, about spirituality, and about truth. During this series, I'll be sharing experiences, reflections, and observations that challenge the way I understand all three. And this is not about having all the answers because I don't. This is about being willing to listen in a different way. May this moment meet you exactly where you are, and may you take what resonates, reflect on what doesn't, and remain open to what is unfolding. It is so. Let's move forward. I thought this part of the story started in Sedona, but it didn't. It started when my life was falling apart in Kansas City. Well, I say falling apart, but what was really happening was that my reality was rearranging itself for something greater. I just couldn't see it or feel it at the time. During that time, I felt a very clear internal knowing that I needed to go to Sedona. It started coming to me like in the summer of 2025. And I didn't hear it as a voice, but the message was undeniable and very clear. You need to go to Sedona. Yeah, I didn't even have a plan when that happened. I didn't even know how I was going to get there. I didn't even know why I was going, but I started saying it anyway, kind of like what I did when I said, I'm moving to Mexico. And now I'm in Mexico. So with Sedona, I started looking up Airbnbs. I was looking at property to purchase. I was imagining myself there before I had any physical reason for me to go. That's something I learned about myself. I don't always move when things make sense. I move when something feels true, even when I can't explain it yet. So when my life rearranged itself for me to be possible to go to Sedona, I was incredibly grateful and I started scheduling my trip in December. I had initially planned to spend a Saturday in Sedona and spend a couple of days in Kansas City before transitioning back to Mexico. But as the months went on, I was like, why not just spend the whole time there? Or something came over me because I, at the last minute, changed my trip from spending Saturday to Saturday, from spending Saturday to Monday there. I was like, why not just stay in Phoenix for the weekend? I've not been to Phoenix. So anyway, when I finally arrived to Sedona, it didn't feel new. It felt familiar, like I had already been there energetically before I ever arrived physically. And I just went with the flow. I had some things planned out, so like very few things planned out. But for the most part, I just was kind of moving with the flow. So much so, the Airbnb host that I scheduled with in December canceled with me the first night that I was in Sedona. And mind you, it's a Saturday night and it's spring break. And so I had to go find accommodations on that first night, even though I had planned to stay up in a place, an Airbnb, since December. So that's kind of how the flow went. But even in all of the flow, I was still divinely guided and protected, and everything worked out how it was supposed to. So, Tuesday morning of my trip, I felt a strong nudge to go to Boynton Canyon. And I didn't want to go because I just stayed up the night before binge watching Paradise on Hulu. And I was comfortable resting and enjoying the new Airbnb that I had just scheduled in. But when the nudge is that clear, you can't ignore it. I learned that I can't resist what I'm being pushed to do. So I got up early. It was like 7 o'clock in the morning. I got dressed. And as I was getting ready, I was led to wear a necklace. I don't have it on me right now, but it's a brand of necklace called the Seeds of Life. And I bought it the day before because I was led to purchase it. And when I got to the counter, the woman who checked me out told me that the proceeds for that necklace is donated to adults with disability. And I started crying right at the counter because I didn't know that before I picked it up. There's no signage to say that. And I've shared my story of my son, who's often mislabeled as disabled, but I believe his telepathy ability is a gift. And so I was able to share that with her when I purchased it. But I was guided to wear this necklace on my trip to the canyon. Anyway, so I drove to the trailhead and made my way. But when I got there, I was by myself and I actually got a little lost on the trail, but there was some kind people on the trail that was going to the same place that I was going to. So they helped me out. Eventually, I made it to the vortex because that's what I was going there for. And the energy there was super powerful. I sat on the feminine side for about an hour, and I sat on the masculine side for about an hour. And I was feeling so expansive and so happy. I just sat there being present with the view, and it's really a multisensory experience. So, anyway, I'm done with that. I'm walking back to the car. I'm saying, Happy Tuesday to everybody that I see. And I walk past this couple, and this guy, the guy of the couple, is wearing a shirt that says Gemini AF. And I laughed and stopped them and just shared that I have a lot of air energy in my life right now because the air energies are needing to teach me something about my fire energy. During our conversation, the woman, Jill, noticed my necklace. And she told me that she used to own a metaphysical store that carried them in Mississippi. And so I shared with her that I had just purchased it the day before. And I told her the story about, me telling her, the cashier, about my son and how he's non speaking and telepathic. And so then she proceeds to tell me, and with jaws dropped, with constant spirit chills going through the both of us, that she just presented a new book that she wrote at the Sedona Ascension Conference. And the book that she wrote is about starseed children. It's literally called Children of the New Earth. And in that book, she's speaking about children like my son who are have these telepathic abilities and have a different connection to the divine than what we've ever seen in life. And so, like I said, as we're talking, spirit chills are constantly flowing through both of us. And it was hot outside. It wasn't even cold. That's how I know when spirit contacts me and connects with me, it doesn't matter the temperature outside. I just get cold. And so, uh, a very, very, very distinct spiritual affirmation of what I was experiencing. In that moment, it felt like everything was aligning. She talked about the book that she channeled from Spirit, and she said that she initially said it's on pre-order on Amazon and that I could get it there. But then she remembered she had copies of the book in her car. And so we walked back to her car at the trailhead and she just signed one. I was willing to pay for it, but she just gave it to me. And I was moved to tears because that was actually the second time in Sedona that I received kindness from strangers that were just giving me stuff for free. And I know that after listening to her story and the reason why she came at the time that she came, that our connection was a divine orchestration. There's no other explanation for it. The next day, I had planned to go to Cathedral Rock to another energy vortex, but when I arrived at the parking lot that people needed to park at, it was completely full. And so I was redirected to go to the Chapel of the Holy Cross. They didn't tell me to go, but that was actually second on the list. Cathedral Trail was first on the list. And so after I parked in a neighborhood because there was no parking there, on the way walking to the cathedral, I'm, in my normal jovial self, happy Wednesday. And I say happy Wednesday to this man who's riding a bike and he's waiting to cross the street. He's going to bike ride on a trail because he lives in Sedona, but I am walking to the Chapel of Holy Cross. And so he stops me, and after I say happy Wednesday, he asks me, "Why are you so happy?" And I get that question a lot. And have got that question a lot over my lifetime. And I was just like, because I'm blessed and I'm so grateful to be in the energy of Sedona. And so he says, I want to share my story with you. Do you have time for me to share my story with you? I'm like, yeah. So then I listened to his story of being a drug addict and a drug dealer, and how through his acceptance of Jesus Christ, he was able to change his life. And now he lives in beautiful Sedona, and he, my words, lives a life he can't believe he gets to live every day, because his life is drastically different from the life that he had before he accepted Jesus Christ into his life. And then he even proceeds to give me the pocket Bible that he had me read verses out of. Even though my perspective on religion and spirituality has expanded beyond the religious context, I can still recognize sincerity. So I was able to sit there and listen and affirm his whole story, and I honored his truth. But when he gave me the Bible, I knew that was yet another sign for me. I was like, okay, okay. After that experience, I felt a nudge towards something that I hadn't planned to do. Reach out to a church I learned about that had a whole ministry dedicated to children with special needs. And in that ministry, telepathy was highlighted. And the members of that church even created a nonprofit that exists with the mission of reshaping how society sees autism and special gifts, unveiling purpose, value, and gifts that are too often hidden. That's directly from their website. And this connects back to a conversation I had on a flight with a woman from Spain that I met on our connecting flight to Kansas City. I'm coming from Mexico. She's coming from Spain. We sit next to each other on the flight going to Kansas City. And I introduce myself to her, and then she tries to say hi to Raymond. And I introduce him as I always introduce him. He's non-speaking and telepathic. He's not going to respond, but he knows what you're saying. He's 100% um, cognizant, and he's understanding of what you're saying. And so when I told her about his telepathic gift, she told me about a podcast that she listens to called The Confessionals. And on that podcast, there was an episode where a pastor from Phoenix was being interviewed about the telepathic children in his congregation. And I'm like, what are the odds of that? This complete stranger from Spain, traveling with her family to Kansas City, tells me about a podcast from a pastor that lives in Phoenix, and that pastors at a church in Phoenix, and they have a separate ministry for children with special needs, but they have this literature on telepathy. I was like, okay, this is like one of those in your face, like you can't deny the connection, because she didn't know that I was going to Phoenix the next week. I was literally going to Phoenix the next week. She had no idea. This is a complete stranger. She didn't know that I changed my vacation leave date from the Saturday to a Monday. She had no idea. We exchanged information. She sent me the podcast on that Tuesday morning before I met Jill. I went back and looked at the time. I'm like, what are the odds? There's no explanation for this. And then I finally was able to listen to that podcast on the Thursday of my trip. As I'm sitting next to Grand Canyon, I listened to all 2 hours and 31 minutes of the podcast. And I couldn't deny the feeling that I was feeling, that I need to reach out. And so when I returned to my Airbnb from Grand Canyon, I initially reached out to the leader of the special needs ministry, and she redirected me to Pastor Joe, the author of the book and the person that brought attention to the telepathic children in the church in Phoenix. And so I emailed him, he responded, and he invited me to meet him between services. And at that point, I'm in complete alignment, right? Every step, every conversation, every encounter, this is all colliding into this moment. But here's what I didn't realize yet. Alignment doesn't remove responsibility. It requires discernment. Just because something is divinely orchestrated doesn't mean that it's divinely interpreted. And what I experienced next inside that space made that very clear.